So this is a new way of looking at the evidence. I thought this was interesting too. We knew, according to the police, that he had cased the house. That's kind of how we saw it. That this white Hyundai Elantra, we believe was his, it still has to be proven, had cased the joint 3 times or so before the actual moment of the murders, which the cops are putting at around 4:02 a.m. And your theory, having studied this more than any outsider, outside of law enforcement that I know, is that it wasn't a casing. This was a man who, other than his heroin addiction, had not led a life of violating the law and was in PhD studies to, work against criminals and try to understand them and help law enforcement, figuring out whether he could cross it in a profound and before and after way.
If he were actually casing it, he would have noticed all the cars in the driveway, a house full of people. He might have wondered if there were people he would have a physical confrontation with that he couldn't overcome. He also would have noticed a DoorDash driver coming at 4 a.m. delivering food to Xana, and he would have known that she was probably still awake. I don't think any of these more reasonable thoughts entered his mind. I think it was an internal dialogue between Bryan and his demons, and that what was driving him back and forth that night until he crosses that threshold into complete mania.
So the other theory that you reveal in here, made a lot of headlines, is that you believe that this actually was about one victim. This is something we've all wondered. And I apologize to the audience. I should have just offered a few details about the crime at the top of the hour. I just assumed familiarity because our viewers have heard us cover this so often. But it was a murder of 4 young students at the University of Idaho, we believe by this TA/PhD student at a neighboring university. And the 4 students were 2 best friends, Kaylee and Maddie, who are there on the left in the Maddie's up on the shoulders of Kaylee there in this picture of all the roommates who lived there. Xana Kernodle, who's over there on screen right with her boyfriend Ethan's arm around her. Those 2 were killed. They were on the 2nd floor. The 2 blondes, Kaylee and Maddie, were up on the 3rd floor in a bed together. They were lifelong best friends. And these 2 gals on the left and the right were surviving roommates. And the one, Dylan, who's on the left, would be an eyewitness as well. So you believe, just for the viewing audience who's watching this with us on YouTube, that Maddie, who was on the top of Kaylee's shoulders, was the target of this attack. Why?
When Kohberger went to the house, he had no idea, I believe, that Kaylee was there. He goes in on the second, because Kaylee wasn't living in the house really at that point. She was living up north in Coeur d'Alene. She was just in for the weekend to show off her new car. He goes in through the 2nd floor kitchen sliding door. If he was intent on just killing, he would have gone into any of the 2 bedrooms on the 2nd floor. But he's on a deliberate path. He makes his way upward and he goes into Maddie's bedroom, and he then finds that there are 2 young women there, 2 young blonde pretty women, and his only target originally was Maddie. Kaylee tries to back away. She fights back, and she becomes, in a grim, gruesome way, collateral damage. I believe, according to the prosecution and the defense, they both have stated categorically in the courtroom that there's no evidence of Kohberger having any interaction with any of the victims, either in person or on social media prior to the killings. I think, however, that Kohberger, who was a vegan, went to the Mad Greek restaurant, which specialized in vegan food in Moscow. There weren't too many places to get it. And he met Maddie, who was a waitress there. He didn't even have to speak with her. He was a man who lived by obsessions. Look at his decision to become a heroin addict, then to break it, to become the best criminologist. He did things with extremes, and he became, for whatever reason, obsessed by her beauty, her exuberance, her vivaciousness, and he focused on her. And I believe he went by the house sometimes, saw her. I believe the house was a party house. We've all seen the videos of the police coming there and the kids interacting with them. And there's something, full of poignancy in those videos. The kids being kids, the cops being rough town cops, sort of the dynamic, the dialectic of how kids and cops interact on a college campus. But Kohberger is outside of this. And it was a constant rebuke. He had done everything possible, traveled, millions of miles in his own mental vision from this kid on the periphery of events in high school, becoming a heroin addict, to now being a teaching assistant at a celebrated university and a celebrated department at that university. And yet he still couldn't quite get into the swing of things. He still was an outsider. And his outsiderness was a constant insult to him. And that pushed him, I believe, into what can only be described as a mania, to want to feel that he can't live in this world if these constant rebukes to him are going to be living in it too.
It's a stunning theory, and it actually makes a lot of sense if you think about it, because you're right. Kaylee wasn't even supposed to be there that night. Maddie did work at this Mad Greek restaurant. Xana did too. Xana Kernodle, who was another one of the victims, she was there with her boyfriend, which, they've been inseparable from what we heard. And he walked past Xana's bedroom, did he not, Howard, to get to Maddie's room?
And I also believe that if Ethan and Xana had not come out, Ethan, after the murders, they hear the noise. Ethan goes out to confront Kohberger, and before he can even say anything, Kohberger slashes out with his knife and gets Ethan across the neck. Ethan is 6'4", an athlete, and he was a wonderful young man, full of vitality, full of vivaciousness, a sort of happy-go-lucky, life of the party person. And Kohberger snuffs him out. Then Xana speaks up or starts crying, and Kohberger, in one chilling moment, says to her, "Don't worry, I'm not going to hurt you." And of course, he moves in and kills her. She has a defensive wound on her hand. The knife penetrates her palm. It's shoved so strongly, so savagely at her, but she succumbs. And then after killing those two, he walks towards the second floor. He's heading towards the sliding door, trying to leave. And there is Dylan. Dylan sees him, and she can't speak. She's locked in I believe, as she describes it in the police affidavit, I think a shocked state of fright. But at the same
frozen shock phase.
Bryan is locked in his own sort of armory of hate. And if she had spoken up, she might have been, penetrated this protective barrier that he had wrapped around himself, this narrow, focused vision. And I think she would have become a victim too. I think her silence saved her life.
Oh, wow. I'm going to get back to the roommate in a second, but the timeline for the murders is so compressed. We know that they didn't happen before 4 a.m. because, as you point out, the DoorDash driver was there dropping off food to Xana. And so they believe it started at 4:02 when Xana and Ethan presumably would have been awake and in their room eating the food delivery. And then I thought the timeline was to 4:18, which I think is when we see the Hyundai Elantra leaving there, but it may be even more compressed than that, down to like
4:12.
10, 4:08. You go ahead, you take it.
Yes, it's about 4:02 to 4:08 to 4:12. They're not exactly sure, but it's whatever it is. The point you're making is so accurate. It was such a short amount of time. It was such, and he wasn't a trained assassin, and yet he was. One can only imagine if Kohberger was the assailant, filled with so much rage that he was able to do this work with so much manic energy, so much manic viciousness. It's a horrific crime.
Let me tell you a story about a guy named Leo Grillo. Leo was on a road trip and came across a Doberman. Now, this dog was severely underweight and clearly in trouble. Leo rescued the dog and named him Delta. Sadly, Delta was just one of so many animals that needed help. And this inspired Leo to start Delta Rescue, the largest no-kill care-for-life animal sanctuary in the world. They have rescued thousands of dogs, cats, and horses from the wilderness, and they provide their animals with shelter, love, safety, a home. April marked 45 years since Leo rescued Delta. Delta Rescue relies solely on contributions. If you would like caring for these animals to be part of your legacy, speak with your estate planner, because there are tax benefits too. You could grow your estate while letting your love for animals live well into the future. Check out the estate planning tab on their website to learn more and speak with your advisor. We call dog a man's best friend for a reason. You could help those who need it most. Visit deltarescue.org today to learn more. That's deltarescue.org. Thanks so much for watching. If you like what you just saw, hit the subscribe button for more clips and full episodes.